Welcome to the Rabia and Sana show. We're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Paracha. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose, and I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to our episode. Today on our show, we are excited to have Noshad Qayyum, who is a student counselor, a broadcaster, and a men's mental health advocate. Noshad is a Pakistani native currently living in the UK. And so today we're going to talk about a very important topic that is found controversial in society as a whole, but even more so in our South Asian communities. And that is men's mental health. Noshad has been very vocal about his mental health journey and is going to share his story, his perspective, and also offer us some advice on how men in general can have a more healthy relationship with their mental health in society. And so we're really excited about that.
Hello, Noshad. Welcome to the Rabia and Sana show. Finally happening. I know it took some time for us to be able to get around scheduling this episode today, but we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to be able to share. And it's quite exciting because obviously it's a podcast that's across the Atlantic. So me being obviously being born and raised in the UK, my parents being from, as Rabia was saying, from Pakistan, Kashmir. It's interesting because most of my interviews have been within the UK. So this is my second international kind of like podcast interview, and I'm, we're colonial cousins, aren't we? So I'm looking forward to this. So thank you very much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Noshad.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in the UK. The only son. I have three sisters, obviously. So often my nickname used to be, instead of Cinderella, I was Cinderfella. So it was interesting growing up with such a huge presence of my father. I mean, I'm 6'2", he's 6'4". So he was towering above all us above. And growing up with four women, my mum and three sisters, it was very interesting. Being born in the UK, obviously, my parents, I've travelled since I was young as well and studied in different countries, and I managed to learn the culture of where my parents are from and the language. So that was interesting. And bringing back to what we're talking about today, I feel that I'm someone who sees meaning and purpose in life, which is like beyond material possessions. And that's how I was raised, or even physical experience through spirituality. And growing up as a Muslim, it inspired me to connect with the power through prayer and meditation and spiritual practices. And that was in various different ways. I would say as a person, I think I've been very connected to, and I've developed a deep sense of inner peace and joy when I was young, because it was all about emotional intelligence and communication, and it was more about the actual connection between a human one to another, from different backgrounds. So my peace and contentment and joy through many years of nurturing from my parents, and traveling and meeting new people, and the experience, it just gave me a very deep, meaningful human nature of understanding some of my core values. Just to kind of goes on to this, it's an area such as. And it's not typical. I wouldn't say, I'm not less than anybody. I'm not better than anybody. But I do feel that I'm very blessed where I've managed to develop core values. For example, compassion, empathy, kindness towards others, and the belief in the interconnection and the differences and in unison, and these things seeking, harmony in the world around them, but also the manifestation of the spirituality. And I'm emphasizing on this because that's what's made me be able to be vulnerable and express myself, because I learned that at a very young age, so it was nurtured. Obviously, everyone's got their own way of being spiritual. So, but I found my spiritual fulfillment through organized events, my own, again, the religion, as you may have as well, but through nature, music, art. And then went into broadcasting. So it kind of gave me, like a very all-rounder as a personality. So I feel proud. I feel proud that obviously I've become who I've become, not only because of my parents, but the people around me and traveling. So yeah, there you go.
That's an amazing journey that and talking about those core values, your relationship
Yeah.
with your father, your upbringing. I love the Cinderfella. I think that's a very cute and new term. And I think you might need to coin that one. Go a little bit further with that because I think that lots of men may relate to you. So I'm really intrigued with your story because being from the South Asian culture, being brought up in a household where there were more females than males. So I have two-part question. One, growing up with sisters, a mom, and
Yeah.
then you and your dad. And you're saying your father was quite progressive, from what I understand. He was very open-minded and progressive.
Yeah.
Was your father the head of the household, or was it a shared role between your mom and dad? Was your father the authoritative head of the household, or did your mom also have a role in that?
Well, just to kind of, let the listeners and the viewers just know, obviously, in 2018, 5 years ago, my father, and as you ladies know, my father sadly passed away on my wedding day, which was a sudden death. And from then on, my life, it changed. It was like in March time, 2018, my life almost did a 360. It's coming back to answering your question, and I won't prolong it too much because I can talk for England. Being also a broadcaster, it's just a natural thing. So yeah, so with the life turning into out 360 and being away from home for 18 years, like going away at the age I was a bit delayed, I would say, not like mentally, but in terms of timeline. I went to university when I was 20 instead of 18 because I wanted to take a year out. So I was in London and then USA, then Asia, and then to the GCC, Middle Eastern countries. Then after my dad's death, I decided to move back because being the only son, and my mum, fortunately, was diagnosed with cancer at the time, but she's obviously recovered now. So at that time, for me to deal with the 360 of like not being independent anymore, moving back home, not having my own car, job, it changed a lot of things for me. So the work that was done when I was young with my parents, combination effort, that's what made me survive and resist and go. That was the upbringing for the first 18 years. So even though my father was the presence figure, authority figure, he was very much open. So my mother and father always had their differences, but they had that respect, and they would always say to us that, look, we may be going through some trials and tribulations, but we don't want to affect the kids. So they always used to, like, every Friday and Saturday we would have family time. In the evenings we would actually have family meetings every week, and we would choose a destination. So we would actually hash things out. And the thing was, at the time, they worked really pretty well together. And it was almost like, at the time, because I'm 46, my older sister is 48, so it was us two first, and my younger two sisters came a bit late, 10, 15 years later, so they didn't get to actually experience it. So it was just the four of us at the beginning. So my father would basically we would have that fear, oh my god, dad's at home, please switch the TV off, do this. But there was no animosity, or there wasn't any tension. We would know, he's coming in, this is how we like things. And for some reason, we actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed all these experiences, and at times there'd be days where my mum would say, "Look, you take your daughter and go and do your horse riding and plane spotting, which she liked, and spend time. And I'm going to take my son and teach him how to do shopping and clean the house." So we would actually do a role reversal. So it was pretty good for a good 8, 9 years. And I think on top of that, traveling as well, they gave us, I don't know how to explain this, but we had so much freedom. Yet I think it's because early on the days, mother and father, mum and dad, made sure that we had set the boundaries. Now, this was very rare. Even in our community, we didn't have that. So that's why we had boundaries with a lot of people. And my dad often used to say, look, right, you have your family, you have your friends, but then you have your relatives, and they may not approve of us, we may not approve of their thinking and the way things are. However, we still they're part of our family. We need to keep in touch with them, but keep your boundaries. So we knew that from day one. from a very, very early stage. So yeah, I can't complain. I would say I was probably one of the luckiest, blessed for the first 20 years of my life, and my older sister, that now, even when he passed away, all those things that we learned, skill sets, actually helped me survive, you see. So I'm doing a bit of a pulp fiction there, but I've got to, merge it together so for the understanding.
I was just going to say that, it sounds like you've had a very progressive and a very spiritually open and a very, I would say, different from the way our South Asian cultures are normally
Yeah,
raised children. So did you have any impact of culture growing up at all?
absolutely. And are you, sorry, are you saying that as in like my parents' culture, or as they would say, Western culture, or both?
South Asian culture generally, and growing up in the West, it's different when we face
Oh,
it. Yeah.
yeah. Well, my experience actually began when I was 10. My mum and dad had decided, again, I didn't have the younger two sisters then, it was me and they decided that, okay, my sister being 12, me being 10, we're going to go and live in. So me and my mum and my sister went abroad to Kashmir and we toured Pakistan. And then obviously I stayed in an army school there,
Oh,
learned the
wow.
discipline, got to learn the culture. Yeah. And I got to learn the culture and everything. And that year, and I think that was the best decision my parents ever made. Again, it's unfortunate my younger two sisters couldn't experience that, but
Mhm.
it was almost, we were in our own world, because from 87, from me being born 77 to 87, that 10 years, there was so much that was done, traveling, everything. And my mum and dad had said, okay, we're going to focus now. This is the right age. This is when they start developing their analytical skills, problem solving skills, empathy. Now we're going to put them in a different scenario. So typically, we went over there. My mum was building a house, as we do. And we were actually one of the very first ones in the whole village to build one. And my mum was doing her thing. My dad was here then. And we were just like, we were so lucky. I'd have my mum's brothers, my dad's brothers. We were so blessed because we would have people rotating every day, dropping us off at school, picking us up. We had
Yeah.
really a proper, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, honestly, I feel so blessed. It was
Yeah.
amazing. There was no, as we say in our language, there was no gummy. There was no, it's all or nothing. I felt that time, there was nothing that was held back. We learned everything and it was just amazing. And the time that we had in that was amazing.
Mhm. I have a question, and my question
Yes.
is that you had a great upbringing, you had a solid foundation. I think your
Mm,
parents provided that
yeah.
solid foundation, gave you this broad experience of life.
Yes.
What were the challenges growing up? Was it perfect, or what were their challenges?
Oh God, of course it comes with it, as you ladies know. The challenges were because we all almost came like nomads. So Dad used to say we're spiritual nomads because we did move a lot because of my dad's job. I then obviously also moved to France for a year. Then I moved to Amstel in Holland there for a year. So there was pretty much a lot of moves for us, and it disturbed the education part. And then obviously because of that we were homeschooled as well. So there was a lot of focus on that, but it was very difficult and it did strain my parents' marriage to a certain extent. There was a lot of ups and downs as well with it because then as the years went by, and it's not that I'm laundering, I mean, what do you call it? The airing dirty laundry. It's the way it is, everyone has ups and downs, and it was a massive roller coaster. Either my mum and dad were going up really high or they were coming down. There was no balance, you see, but the consistency was there through the dialogue and discussions and talks. And
So, what were those challenges, like ups and downs? What were specifically, if you could pinpoint two or three main things,
yeah,
what would those
well,
things?
initially it would have been the culture shock, getting used to the culture, the language barrier, quickly trying to be resilient and into a new environment. Because even living in the UK, we moved a lot in different places as well. Even though I'm from Yorkshire, South Yorkshire and Sheffield, we did a lot of moves, and these are the challenges were communication, the language barrier, the cultural shock, and it was like we were thrown in the deep end. But through my dad's extended family, my mum's extended family, there was a lot of people coming in and out of our lives as well through the relations at that part. So for me, it was just like on the go. It was stressful for me specifically because I couldn't really, almost, I would say that I kind of lost my childhood as well because it was always like, okay, we're going to go here, you're going to wear a suit, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And it was almost like as if like I was prepping for the Olympics or something like that, in like the knowledge of God or something like that. So it was a lot of discipline and dedication. And then it kind of this is what I'm saying, there was a lot of things about life that I learned at a very late stage, only when I left home for university. Even little things like today's political correctness. Like, I'm not going to say the word like the N word, which is a racist word, the P word. Thing. I didn't even know what they meant until I left home. So I was almost cocoon, shall I say? So I took it with a pinch of salt and just got on with it. But these were challenges, so because I at times I would feel embarrassed that somebody's I was somewhat socially clueless, but I learned that by living in London, and that's why my father said, "You're not going to live at home. You're going to go away to London. It's a different place, it's a different culture shock, and you're going to become a man." So it was almost like, all right. But I appreciate what he did. At the time, I didn't realize what he was doing. That kind of put a strain on the relationship.
I can relate to that because my parents almost did the same to me. I went back to Pakistan from the US when I was 9 years old, lived there for 5 years, went to school there. I also went to an army school and came back to the US. So it was culture shock when we went there, came back here.
Exactly.
Again. But at the same time, I think what I saw firsthand, what I saw in Pakistan happening, and what I saw as far as how culture affects women, and I would never have understood it the way I do now because I lived there. And if I didn't live there, I would have never understood the challenges. So from a male perspective, what were some of the challenges that you saw from the male perspective in living in Pakistan, but being a British, coming from being 10 years old and seeing all that independence and going to Pakistan and living there in school?
I think my age at 10, I just went along with it. I think I created my own world where I remember the olden dramas that used to come on, not Tera Sane, that's a book, sorry. What was it? Doob Kinare. I don't know, these old dramas, Guest House, and I think there was Tera Sane, Doob Kinare. And I think there was a character called Kabacha. And I used to wear glasses, and and they used to call me Kabacha. Yeah. I don't know if you remember it anyway, but or even the listeners or viewers will. But it's like I had to actually get into character with a lot of this. It was almost like, okay, it's an adventure for me. I don't know where it's going to lead, and I just kind of created my own world. And I said, look, my dad always used to say, look, always always find an opportunity out of a difficulty. A lot of things that he used to say to me really registered. It resonated. I mean, it might sound, may Allah forgive me, he was my idol. I worshipped him at that time. I was only young then, obviously. I was growing up, obviously, seeing somebody as an idol, not specifically, is obviously, again, it's kind of not, it's frowned upon, but he was my world, and everything, every word, I just hung on it, and that's it. I used to write things that he used to say. I used to get a dictaphone, record it. So when I was abroad and he was in the UK, I used to listen to it because I used to miss him, you see. So I kind of just created my own world. So I just got on with things and just sat down. But that did actually create a lot of challenges because I wasn't very communicative. I'd be just quiet and just get on with things. So I wouldn't end up telling anybody how I felt. So almost the part that really, I think, and not blaming my parents for this, is the way, because they can't do everything because they're busy doing their own thing, and you're in school. And the school systems, as you know, it's like a full-time job. You're 40 hours a week there. So it's almost, and I think this is very deep as well in our culture and the ethnic community as well, from even Arabs and all sorts and so on and so forth, that we weren't really taught how to express our feeling. So if we were angry, we were supposed to contain it. My dad did actually kind of teach me a few things, but I was only young. I was only 10, 11, I could only do so much. So I was then surrounded by other men that were very kind of like strong figured, but they weren't very expressive. And it's like, okay, you just got to be told what you just got to get on with it. So it was very difficult to actually then express myself. So hence I started writing at a very young age, kept diaries and journals and stuff, and slowly I created my own world where people used to say, okay, where's Noshad gone? He was just here just a minute ago. I'd just walk off and do something else. So it kind of created a bit of isolation for me.
Right. And so that's a very important point that you brought up. Parents don't have a manual to raise children, first of all. So
absolutely, yeah.
That's one thing, that's a given that we do I think as parents, and I know being a parent, I did the best I could with what I knew. And so I think that ability for you to write, like right now, journaling is so huge, right? Everyone says write down. And so we find our ways of expressing and communicating, even though we don't know whether that's helpful or not. So number one, you utilized a tool that unconsciously of writing and expressing, but that communication between two people when, like you were saying about anger and complaints, those are traditionally forms of something's not right. These are all topical topical ways of expressing ourselves. And so you brought up this. So this is a huge, I think, problem in all of society, in every society,
Yeah,
for men especially, because we're conditioned. Men are conditioned to suck it up, be a man, don't,
yeah,
just and so it's just natural that you would feel that isolation. So now that you have that experience, and I know you're very passionate about mental health based on your personal experiences,
yeah.
and you're quite the advocate for it. So, what would you now, looking back, what would you do differently with what you know? Of course, you can't go back, but what would you tell our listeners and viewers of how would you, if someone's going through what you went through and they're not able to
Yeah.
express themselves and they don't have the community or the support structure, what would you
Mm.
recommend for them?
Well, look, I was blessed. I was very lucky that I did have a good support system, but because it's men's mental health, my battle was it's in two folds, and obviously this is naturally what we go through. One, the battle that I was having between my mind and my heart on a daily basis, and that's self struggle of oneself, and secondly to the few people around me. Now, obviously, after my father passing away, sadly on my wedding day, it was very difficult for my ex-wife, well, wife then as well, because she lost her father as well in the same hospital in Manchester. I mean, he passed away on the stage, but he ended up in the same hospital. So, for her barat was from the hospital. My trauma began actually when he actually had the heart attack, and I got up from the seat only once, and then I sat down, and I didn't get off. I didn't get back up for 40 minutes, and it was like I was watching ER or Holby City, the British program hospital, where there's two sets of paramedics, and I'm just like this. Okay, Dad, when are you gonna get up? Come on, you do this all the time. You're a public speaker. You're on BBC. You're a financial advisor. Come on, hurry up. Just get up. You trip up. Just get up. And everybody's looking at me thinking, you okay? I says, no, no, no. Just tell him. Just tell him. And I wouldn't dare look at him because I couldn't see him like that. So it was, it was very difficult for me. Everybody was thinking the aftermath after the funeral. There were 1,500 people at the funeral. It was like, this is your life. Like, where are these people coming from? From my old milkman from 30 years ago. For me, I went into the survival mode / autopilot, as you know. And then just naturally, I lost everything. Everything that I had knew I learned. It's like as it was defragmenting, and I forgotten how to live again. And then slowly, when I started, going through my journey, my mental health journey, then slowly started thinking, oh, Dad used to say this. The survival kicked in, like resilient. You did this. You can. So it was all kind of like a profound awakening again, as you would call it. And obviously, I seeked out help. I did Drew yoga, dhikr, salah, praise. Went through CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBH, hypnosis. I did everything possible. I even sought advice because my dad left a lot behind in terms of projects. I was carrying on with the BBC, like, the interfaith projects. So I would actually seek advice from an imam. I would seek an advice from a pastor, from a rabbi. So I really had that, but I couldn't get myself to do that. I totally lost everything. It just like, I don't want to be alive anymore. So that kind of took a good couple of years to, re-wake.
That must have been very difficult. I can't imagine having that experience on your wedding day, losing your father. So definitely shock. You must have been in shock, and that denial is such a natural part
Yeah,
of the grief process. We're very sorry that
no, no,
was that way, and
yeah.
I know it must have been very difficult.
The thing is, like, even though I'll be honest with you, even though we are doing this podcast and interview, and I just want to let everybody know it's not about me. It's not one to many, it's many to many, because I want people to realize that he is a guy who, has been fortunate, but he's giving something on the plate, and if he can do it, then I can do it. I was very fortunate, like, where I live in the UK, in Yorkshire being the biggest county, it's got the largest amount of suicidal attempts. And I think the national average is men are more likely to commit suicide 4 times more likely than women, but in Yorkshire it's 5 times more likely. In the city that I live, the figures, I'll give you the figures. When I interviewed an organization called Calm. It's not the actual Calm, the one that makes you go to sleep. The voice over one. For the natural meditation. It's another organization. I've forgotten the name. Forgive me. It's an acronym. And they deal with mental health. And they deal with suicidal rate. And they're a national company. Their figures were that this year, every week, 125 people commit suicide in the UK, from which 85% are men. That's around about 11 men a day. It's like a football team. So it's a massive epidemic. Say the killer. I think where the problem is I was lucky because obviously I had access privately to therapy and everything. But if I didn't have that, then I would have then had, initially what they do is they do an assessment on you for 40 minutes. Then they decide and they diagnose what's wrong with you. And then you wouldn't believe this. I had to self-refer myself to the company. And then they then say, okay, these are the numbers. They weren't very helpful because the local services are good, but they've been so stretched currently, not to bring the politics in with the Tories being here for 13 years, everything's been reduced. So I was put on a waiting list for 6 months to have my first appointment. Now, in that time, I could have committed suicide because I tried to commit suicide twice. But luckily, through my income protection or private, I went through and I ended up having 400 sessions in 2 years. I'd have two double sessions every week. But I have lost friends in the last 3-4 years that had they been to suicide, had they been diagnosed, right, and had a rescue plan, then obviously it takes time. Like for me, it's taken 4 years. For some people, it might take a lifetime. So everyone's got their own timeline. But if you go by the actual principle of like, okay, get yourself diagnosed, find out what it is that you need to do, have a rescue plan, and then, oh, I've been put on a waiting list. That's why I set up a private GoFundMe where I allot £250 per person. It's available to everybody. I don't, in terms of the organizations that I work for or have created, we call it a CIC, which is a community investment company for charities. And these are then you get funding and then you give back on suicide prevention, so on and so forth. The problem is that I think with men also is that we don't do ourselves any favors by keeping things in and not expressing ourselves. And again, it comes from me now, I would say verbal diarrhea. I tend to talk a lot, get slightly distracted when I'm the interviewee, because when I was young, I felt I wasn't heard enough. So I have to talk. So the more I expressed myself around the women in my life, I'm not going to mention any names, as you know, the worse they got. They would just walk away and didn't know how to deal with it. So that was a massive, massive challenge and obstacle for me, and it is for many men. But not putting any blame on the women. This is where the workshops come in. I took my older sister to an Islamic workshop, their take on of what suicidal and depression is, because a lot of people in our community say there's no such thing as depression or mental health. Just do your salah, zikr, and you're fine. That's the big problem as well, because there's massive in denial, and that comes from generation. So with my sisters, they got to understand what I was going through the workshop. And my mom, I used to take her to some of my CBT sessions, and she then got a proper so she was observing me. So it's not, I couldn't talk about it at home. So that's how it took them good 4 years to catch up to what I was going through. But in that, when I tried to commit suicide twice, that's when their awakening came, like, right, it's serious. He really needs help. And I'm thinking, I've been actually telling you, I've been pouring my heart. Why are you not listening to me? Why are you not listening to me? And I just felt that everybody was just moving away, and I felt let down. My heart was broken. But in hindsight, obviously you get on with it.
I just find that really, really interesting for you to say that the more you expressed yourself, the more, it was harder for women. And I would say because women in our culture to get that, because we don't really have that space at all in our culture to listen to emotions. Emotions are so shut down. And it's the same for grief. I think the way grief is processed in our culture is like, do it in your own time, shut it down. And especially for you as a male, I think it's even harder because you have to be that strong. You have to always be that hardcore. You are not, you don't have emotions.
That's what actually led me to try and commit suicide in the first place. Because that wasn't because I couldn't handle the world. It's just that I didn't want to be in a world where my dad wasn't. My dad, sometimes I once said to my mum, I said, Mum, I love you to bits, and I'm never going to leave the responsibilities. And she's very much like, go and live your life. And I know, you're always going to be there for me. She's very independent, alhamdulillah, in that respect. And I said to her, do you know what, in terms of the upbringing, my father was my mother and father. And she said, why did you say it? I said, because you've had a part in it, but you've had a part in it as a mother, as in making food, helping me to cook this, which is good. It's all good. But in terms of the principle of life, obviously he taught me it. And I said, my dad used to laugh about it. He used to say, look, right, we always say that the heaven's underneath the mother's feet, but he says, don't forget, the father is the key to the door to heaven. And, he used to always like say, well, behind every successful man, there's always there's a woman. And he used to say, I've got 4 women behind me, my wife and my 3 daughters. And he used to reframe it in such a positive way that, he'd make it really exciting. Really exciting. He was passionate. So this is what it is. What you've just done, Sana, there, you hit the nail on the head. Because when I got married, the thing was, my dad passed away and he had the heart attack before the nikah. It was just 2 minutes into his speech.
Yeah.
So there was 500 people there, and really, I didn't really even experience a wedding. It was almost, now looking back after it, after burying him and looking at it, it was like it was his leaving do. And I celebrate his life because he died doing what he did, what best, public speak on the stage. For me, obviously, the elders decided, okay, he's going to get married. So we decided in the Garnam, I did whatever, and I rushed to hospital. I wasn't even conscious until after the next day that I was married. On that day, I didn't even know what was going on, and everybody was thinking, Noshad, we're really proud of you. Sabr, patient, trauma. It wasn't my patient. It was trauma that began at that point. And I didn't really want to say it out because I didn't accept it either. But a year after, so 2018, he passed away. 2019, sadly, my wife and I decided to get a divorce, and it was somewhat messy. Women are emotional creatures, and she didn't want to waste. We tried, but I had to face a lot of stigma and stereotype through her, and there was a lot of pressure from her family and my family. And it's automatic; they just want the best for us, but they didn't. What they thought was best for us was actually worse for us. And I always used to say to her, "We're going to end up, not literally, but we're going to end up killing each other because like going through our own things and we're just going crazy." And she laughed it off. And then the year after, 2019, we officially got a divorce, and that's when I began grieving. I started grieving a year after my dad's death, so that was 1 year behind, you see. And that's where, just to explain to you, that's where my actual journey of recovery began.
Right. And I just want to say that grief is also associated with divorce.
Yeah.
Both your marriage and your father's death, the grieving began after the
Yeah.
divorce because there was a life transition that was happening at the time when you lost your father. You were going from one as a son to a head of a household into your marriage.
Exactly.
And so that transition, it was like there was a death and a rebirth at the same time. And then after a year, when you made the choice for that divorce.
I'd like to add something to that. I can't say that I loved my father or I love my mother as more than you love your parents, because the love is there to moon and back, as we say. But the thing, I think difficult thing was because somebody says that it was like a movie, because like the 4 weddings and a funeral, like you had like in your lifetime, weddings are a very important day. Think complete death is also something which is difficult, and then divorce, and it was all in 1 year. And it's just it hit me so hard. But at the same time, also with then COVID coming along and the cost of living, that's made it even worse and more, because people with the system and the people who are established. Because like I was looking at my sisters and saying, okay, you're going through grief and I understand it, but you've got your jobs to go back to, you've got your family, you've got your own house. And I didn't have any. Being 46 now, 4 years away from 50, I've stopped my life. I've been engaged 4 times, then married once. Like, what happened? 4 weddings and a funeral, what? And my father always used to say, come on, like, our relationship became they had a lot of challenges. I don't care what you do in your life now until you get married. I says, Dad, okay, next year, please, next year. And then when it happened, he went. So there was a lot of resentment and a lot of like kind of soul searching, and almost, I never lost faith in myself or the being. But then the concept of it, I thought, I needed him. This is the time that when I needed him. Why did he go? I would really go crazy. And it comes back to, and the other thing is, with our community, they don't help. They're very pedantic, and they're very like, well, so are you going to listen to stay with your mum, or are you going to go back abroad where you were in Dubai, where your wife is? So you're going to be a mummy's boy, or you're going to be, I'm thinking like, I'll decide when I will, and whatever's best. So thank you for your time. But at the same time, I do feel that when the story was shared with the Imam, he was quite a young Imam, when he shared the story on Facebook, I was angry with him. I said, why did you do that? He said, no, my sister said, no, leave it, let him share it, because it was shocking for him as well. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because when he posted it, my dad, it had 6,000 shares, 3,000 likes, and 4,000 comments from around the world. And I'm just thinking, wow, my father was so lucky, because as soon as he passed away, the DJ at the wedding started playing the Tilawat, and there was 500 people praying for him. He couldn't have gone. That was the best way he could have ever gone, because he He went doing what he did best as a public speaker with his friends and family there. He was the happiest. So I thanked my ex-wife at that time that, what you did for my dad there, nobody else could have done for that instance. But at the same time, when I was receiving people trying to understand my situation, especially within our community, there wasn't much sympathy or empathy. There wasn't much active listening. There wasn't much, this counseling type of thing. It was the non-Desis, the non-Muslims, that resonated more with the story. There's an organization I'm a non-executive director for, which came through as a participant in courses for men's mental health, then a facilitator. There was a company that awarded funding and they wanted to interview me. So after they interviewed me, it resonated so much with them, you would not believe. They awarded that company, because of my story and how they helped me, £125,000. And I'm thinking, wow. And then I felt guilty, even like, is it worth telling my story? Does anybody really care? But I got so many people contacting me through, obviously, Clubhouse, as we met, that I started thinking, do you know what? I need to start. I'm strong enough to be vulnerable. I want people to know what happened to me and how they can cope with this and not to give up. So this is not about me. This is about other men, not only other men, but also women and children. We can't exclude this, because this is a global thing. So even though I'm as you would say, advocate or a campaigner for men's mental health, I never ever turn back women or even anybody from a different gender. And I know you wouldn't do that either, but because it's about men, because that's what the actual challenge is, I'm open for that and for the question.
Yeah.
Hence, I've come this far. So
Right. And so what an incredible story of how your story is making an impact on other lives. Your father got to experience so much love and
yeah,
so much respect. And like, I always believe that God has a bigger plan. One thing I want to make clear is that there are layers of every experience. One is that emotional impact that we go through the loss of a parent or a loved one. Then the other one is healing the trauma, which is what you were talking about and what Sana was bringing up in terms of recognizing that these are emotions that we experience and that we have
yeah,
to overcome. And then sharing that story as a part of that healing process, and then actually putting positive steps into action, and also having these workshops that you're creating and creating that GoFundMe. And I believe you're also writing a book, or you have a book to
yeah,
that you would like to hear about as well. So there's so much work that you're doing for the relief of this problem. And I totally understand when you said that this is not just about men's mental health or women's mental health. This is a collective problem, but each
yeah,
of us
absolutely.
has something special to do for a particular part of the problem. And men definitely have a bigger challenge when it comes to being emotional, when it comes to being vulnerable, when it comes to being expressive and communicative.
Yeah.
So just for you to create that platform and that space for people, for men in
Yeah.
particular, to do that, I think that is just, I'm so amazed at that.
Look, it's my duty, and I don't, even if someone thanks me, I'll say, look, don't thank me until the job is done, because look, I'm now doing this and I'm carrying this on for my father, because he was very much of a community worker. Honestly, in the 80s, my dad was, like a biker, long hair. When he was on BBC, he was the very first person within the north of England to create Radio Ramadan within BBC. When we only had Network East, and they were regional then. BBC Asia Network only came in 2002. So the contribution that he's made towards media and finance, he should have got an OBE, he should have been recognized for it. But he was a very, very humble person. He used to say, son, when you approach a situation, when you approach a person, always approach with an open mind and humbleness. Let them have let them have their 15-minute fame, because they need to be reinforced. One needs to be acknowledged, because they need to have that gratitude. So don't take that away from them. You know what you've done. My father's raised over £20 million in his lifetime, right? He used to organize shows. That late Clark Ahmed, he had leukemia. He's buried in East London. He had leukemia. They became friends, like Jay and Viru. While we were in Pakistan, we're not in Kashmir for 1987, he was living with my dad. They then created a show where they would, in those days, there would be places like the Birmingham NEC, Nottingham, Manchester, Bradford, where there seats 2,000-3,000 people. There would be all the heavyweights. Like, do you remember Sheikhi, Benjamin Sisters, Sajad Ali, Shaukat Ali, star-studded, Omar Sharif, Imran Khan, meeting all these famous people from Bollywood. And I was just like starstruck like this, like, what's going on here? So I was so lucky that I got exposed to that as well. But it's not something that you mentioned to anybody, like, I'm quiet about it. But it was one of those where it's like, my dad used to say, look, we have to learn how to learn. And your job is to learn, to earn in terms of like respect and things like that, and serve unity. And he was all about that. And that's what I'm trying to do through my book and all interviews that I've had and everything. That it's not about me, it's about us. And if I can do it, if a Joe blog like me can do it, then anyone can do it. There's no excuses. So that's why I'm trying to bridge these gaps where you can't help everybody, but there's been times where I've been hit so much with mental health because when my father passed away, his younger brother passed away the year after. He was 48 and he was in Dubai for 20 years. Then his other brother passed away the year after. These three were the eldest. So my grandfather, 99, he's still alive. He gave me a different perspective. I was very close to them because I lived in Saudi and Dubai, and I had a chance to spend time with them. And I thought, hang on a minute, they're all dropping like flies with heart attack. And I went, I need to get checked out. I'm always my health, get checked out. This is becoming, we've never had heart issues in our family, and all of a sudden, sudden death. My grandfather, just from another man's point of view, he gave me a very different perspective. He said, look, son, you're my grandson, you're the eldest one. I'm not going to put no pressure on you. He did say that obviously if you were married and had a kid, I'm actually the last one. If I don't have kid, my generation's finished, meaning that I'm the last person to actually then forward it. So he was saying, don't put any pressure. It's all right. But he said, look, I've lost 3 sons. I should have gone. So how do you think I feel? So you're not alone in this. And that was a turning point. All the help that I got from my friends, any help that I got, it was that piece of advice that he gave me that kind of turned things around. And he said, and I went, I've been selfish. Why did I not think that if he was suffering as a man? So almost, even though I was saying it's me, there were other men suffering as well, and I didn't focus on that until afterward. But I had to go through my emotions. I had to go through for 2 years, be a bit off the radar, to then kind of reconnect and then realize. And now I keep in touch. I ring him every Friday. He says, you're going to come. He says, look, your uncles and dads have gone. You've still got another 2, 3 uncles, but they were the closest ones. I want you to come next year and spend some time with me because I could die. And I said, right, I'll do that. Now he's now using that as emotional blackmail, but in a good way. But yeah, so what I've thought is, like, I miss my father. It's a massive vacuum, and you both can relate to that. However, because I've got women in my family, no offense to you or my sisters, I need more men around me. So that's how I go out, and we go out to do our usual recreations and sit down, and there's a shisha cafe my friend owns. We sit there, have food, sit down, talk, or we go for walks. And now it's like, I need to spend more time. I really pushed my friends away. I smashed my friends' cars up. I actually hit them. I swore at them. I was going through really, really bad. I was getting paranoid. I was having, would you believe it, when I was on my antidepressant tablets, I was going through lucid dreaming with astral projection. I don't know if you've experienced that. And because of that, I used to keep on seeing my father smiling and walking away. And would you believe it? That's what led me to my second attempt of suicide in the bathroom. I tried to drown. But one of my brother-in-laws came in, smashed the door down, and saved me because I felt I was being tormented. And I was sorry for being explicit, but obviously I was in the bath, but I was on the corner just crying like a baby. And I've never done that before. Never. That's when my mum said, I didn't know what you were going through. I'm so, so sorry. All the 4 years, it was a battle between me, my mind, and other things did come out of it as well. Because look, I want to put it in a nutshell, because I feel that I owe it to the world and I owe it to you ladies, that we know in our culture and our religion that we have the evil eye called Nazar, and then we have the voodoo jadoo. I'm going to say it openly. It's in the Brazilian cultures and different cultures. There was some element of that done. And my father and I, we had a reading from somebody through proper channels, that my father and I were very, very much filled to the brim with evil. And it could have been possibly, but Allah knows best. He's the planner of the planners. But these are things that our prophets have gone through. But then I come back not because I'm not a scholar or anything, but I do know 2 things. One is that even the days of our prophet, last peace be upon him, the best of mankind, He was an orphan. He lost his children before he left. He was a widower. Who am I? This is coming back to it. And I remember when I did Radio Ramadan, as they call it, last year, there was a gentleman that called in, was very more of a very typical cultural thing, saying, Bete, son, you don't need to talk about these things. Just do your salah, zikr, and you'll be fine. There's no such thing as mental health. This is all, to a certain extent, he is right, because we are, so much that we forget that we've got vices where we can recover spiritually, medically, scientifically, and we should have this philosophy that we shouldn't leave any stone unturned, that we should try everything possible. Then we don't say we didn't do this. And I said to him, I said, well, okay, I didn't say anything, but the lady that was with me that day, she said, well, do you remember Surah Doha, which was revealed during the 6 months when the last prophet wasn't being contacted by Angel Jibril and Allah, and he was sad. Maybe they didn't use the word depression, but it was a time that I was there, and he went quiet then. He said, have a look at Surah Doha. That's when it was revealed because of that. On top of that, if you look, what did we grow up with? Hollywood movies, Bollywood movies. If you remember Lethal Weapon 2, Mel Gibson was already talking about men's mental health when he was trying to kill himself and his wife. And I used that as a video to post on TikTok. We've just in the last 10 years got to know what mental health is. At that time, we didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah.
And then in that, again, because everybody becomes selfish. I do want to become selfish. I then honestly, I'll obviously have kind of taken over on this, but I have two cousins, relatives in my family. One was going through bipolar. She's conquered it now, but she manages it. And I had a cousin who was cutting himself. He was depressed. And when they were there for me, I ticked, oh my God, and I apologized. I sat down, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I wish I was there, but I'm here. And honestly, that made such a difference. Just that bond, that thing that they cried. They said nobody has said that to us in the past. That's all you need sometimes. People think you need money, but it's just that connection. It's just that instead of saying, are you okay? You don't feel suicidal today. And this is what the courses teach you. And I always urge the people within our community to go on these workshop courses so they can learn how to signpost, how to see the prompts and the triggers and stuff. And I think slowly people are doing it. We did one that had 150 men coming, and it was very eye-opening. Even some of the men that came who are quite religious, pious, they was like saying, "Oh my God, we didn't know anything." It was like an eye-opener for them. It was like, "Wow, we thought we knew how to handle depression or somebody that's going through mental health," and they learned so much from it. But we got to continue the good work. It's going to be. I think it's going to be for a long, long time. And I think with the new generation, with the technology, I think they're going to face far worse problems. And I think we need to be there for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. What an amazing story, and what great work you're doing and carrying your father's legacy. I think that's what I'm hearing. There is a legacy here that you want to
Absolutely.
carry on and, make this world a better place for a few that have
Yeah.
the access to healthcare, for us to overcome our mental health issues, which is something that each and every person on this planet, there are about 8 billion people, I think each and every one of us will experience some form of in our lifetime. And some of it, some of us have chronic situations where we need that support, management, these workshops that you're talking about, the community, and education.
Absolutely. I know you ladies are doing. That's how we actually came across each other, because you're doing your good work as well, and it's a team effort. It's not just one person, as you know. You just got to carry on and do what you can. But I think the most important thing is that during that time, I honestly, I've developed things like social anxiety disorder. I've developed, I know these are labels, but I was, in the last 3, 4 days that I've been out, I was very nervous. There's been times where I didn't get out of bed for days. There was times where I didn't even change my clothes for a whole week. I went through it's like, people might find it embarrassing, but I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, because if I'm not raw and truthful, then I'm not doing justice to the work. And we're all human beings and we can relate to that. So I know for a fact that if it wasn't for others, I wouldn't have got this far either. So it's a team effort. That's it.
Very, very interesting, Noshad. Thank you for sharing your
Thank you.
story. I think it's really beautiful, and everything that you said about grief and processing grief. And the point that's coming up for me is that you got that support after you went through some really extreme measures. You unfortunately tried to commit suicide twice, and it's the way what Rabia and I have talked about in so many of our episodes, and what I went through in my marriage. Like, it has to sometimes get so extreme for us to make our South Asian counterparts really understand and to get that support after all these extreme measures. It's like we support is not really needed for us to change the cultural norms. It's not really there. But Rabia and I had this quote where we said that support is not necessary, but it is good to have, because we feel alone. We feel like, am I wrong in feeling like this? And that's what makes us do these extreme measures. But I'm really glad that you were able to get the support that you needed and are able to now share that and become an advocate and do that for others. And that's
Look,
that's,
I'm just here to do the good work, and that's it. And I know it sounds cheesy and cliche, but that's the honest truth. I think that's the reason why I wasn't really too successful in broadcasting, because I was looking as a platform. Because these days it's not what you know, who you know, and I wasn't able to make a career out of it, but it was a hobby. I was in Riyadh, Dubai. I got to have fun, but had I gone as if I had not put the emotional intelligence in it, and if I had not thought, okay, I'm creating a platform for the catchment area and people to voice their concerns and raise awareness, because I had that instilled through my dad. That's why I wasn't. I know I'm going to blow my own trumpet, but I could have been one of the best DJs in UK. I know that because I love the work. I do voiceovers. I know that I could have given it justice even if like somebody's birthday I'd given 5 minutes on air. I because of that, I almost sacrificed. I did sacrifice a career in broadcasting, and that's the truth. But you know what? It makes me feel better. The satisfaction is priceless. And sadly, not a lot of people can say that. But you know what? I'm proud of myself. I can say it. Self-gratitude, and the same with you guys, ladies, as well. So I'm gonna say that's my strength.
That's amazing.
It'll be weakness. It'll be weakness maybe for others, but for me, it's a strength.
No, but I think you hit something such a key point, which is that self-acknowledgement throughout this journey, but each individual acknowledging themselves. Really, we want so much support from other people, and giving it to ourselves is so important as well. So you just pronounced that. And so we have listeners and people are going to be watching this episode. How can they reach you?
Well, look, one thing that I do lack is the online presence as a career thing, and I'm having a meeting with somebody who's going to kind of reboot everything for me, and because I want to shift in a different way instead of going back into educate, as in teaching or teacher training or anything like that. I'm studying towards becoming a mentor and a counselor ultimately. For further education. So if they want to, because my broadcasting name is Mr. Q, they can either get me on Mr. Q41, which is on my Insta, or Mr. Q Voice, which is on TikTok, which I'm gonna obviously I've got a separate one. I'm setting up some official accounts the next couple of months with the book publishing, but if they want to, it's Mr. Q41 on Insta, Mr. Q Voice on TikTok, and probably they're the most two.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you'll come back, because I think there's a lot more here to unpack. We can go into
definitely,
what we talked about, and I'll just highlight a couple of things. You talked about masculine positivity, where men are taught to be a certain way. You talked about spirituality bypassing, where you use spirituality or religion to bypass emotional health. So there's a lot here that we can just dive into one topic. And, please come back.
Definitely.
Again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and I'd love to come again onto your show. Thank you for allowing me to, giving me space to actually share.
Thank you so much, Noshad.
All right. Oh, yeah. So it's that time. So we're two Desi girls.
Reinventing cultural norms.
With love.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow the Rabia and Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself, and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.
See you next time.